Well, hello everybody. Welcome into Great Atmosphere here on February 12th of 2024. Nice Monday. We got plenty to talk about, so we're just going to dive right into it right now. We have our major low pressure system that has been plaguing the weekend here on the eastern seaboard, primarily the southeast, starting midday yesterday. That is already begun to occlude over the Ozarks and Arkansas and the Mississippi River Valley, and is beginning to make a little bit of trouble for the southeast, and then eventually will be making its way into the northeast to become a traditional I-95 nor'easter clipper system. Should deliver maybe a foot or even more snow up in the New England regions. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first, we're going to start out with the southeast and the don't want to say minor, but certainly a diminished severe threat that we are experiencing here today. We can see the results of this. We have an occluded low that is spinning over the Ozarks and the Mississippi River Valley. We have some advection fog rolling in as cold air comes in from aloft down to the surface at the surface levels and interacting with that low-level humidity. We also have interactions with the subtropical jet coming off of the Mexican subcontinent over the Gulf of Mexico and up and into the southeast. Difluent flow aloft over the greater Tennessee and northern Alabama, Mississippi regions is currently kicking off some discrete convection that will ultimately be our cold frontal squall that will push through the Carolinas overnight tonight. And then we also have our primary convective initiator off the initial cold frontal boundary that it's making its way currently over southern Georgia and the panhandle of Florida right now. Moving on into what we're looking at for the mosaic radar, we can see those two general rain bands moving its way through. Warm front rain shield moving over South Carolina, being a little bit convectively inhibited right now over the Piedmont of North Carolina. Excuse me. But we have our primary initial cold frontal line, and then our stationary boundary line that's going to be over Tennessee, with the warm sector out ahead of this, creating that rain shield. And then we can see some discrete cellular formations occurring over the northern tier of Alabama, and some circulation over the Mississippi River Valley over near Memphis on western Tennessee. At the moment, we can take a look at where those primary areas are with our lightning tracker right now, with our primary storms over central and western Tennessee and the Big Bend region of Florida. We can take a look at our all hazards index about what we're going to be experiencing over here in the next couple of hours. So we have, as that cold air wraps around itself, the rain on the back end of this system will primarily be snow, and in those elevated regions of the Ozarks will precipitate a winter storm of some kind, with winter storm warnings just recently coming out over the northwestern Arkansas region and southwestern Missouri, with high wind warnings actually coming out across the majority of the Carolinas over the Blue Ridge Escarpment. Even some, I should say, actually these are just wind advisories, the browns, and then the oranger ones right here over the Blue Ridge Escarpment in the higher elevations of the Appalachian Mountains. Those are high wind warnings with, we would expect winds to gust over, I believe, 65 miles an hour in some cases on those higher elevations. We also have flood advisories for the folks that are in that rain shield, and then we have a severe, I believe that is a tornado watch. Yes, tornado watch, and a flash flood advisory for areas that are experiencing training thunderstorms over the southwestern parts of Georgia and the Panama City, Tallahassee regions of Florida as we go into the evening. And then, of course, we have our big nor'easter winter storm that is going to be making its way over into the New England and northeastern regions of the U.S. That'll be coming their way in about 24 to 36 hours. Let's take a look at what the NAM 3-kilometer convective model is saying at the moment in terms of what we expect over here in the next 18 hours. We see that surface low is starting to make its way up into the northeast. We see the snow on the back end of it, creating a little bit more isotropically induced altitudinal snow on the western edge of the surface low as it makes its way through. We can see that primary surface trough making its way all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico and the primary boundary that we have kind of been seeing over Florida start to make its way through. This has generally been a hotspot for tornadoes actually in this winter season. We've seen, obviously, there was a strong EF3 tornado that hit Panama City, started as a waterspout, and made its way inland in the early morning hours. about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Panama City. Same kind of event keeps on kind of occurring in this moment. That's with a surface trough making its way in and across and kind of tapping into some of that instability that's present over the Gulf of Mexico. We can see that rain shield making its way over the Carolinas as we move forward in time here on Monday, and then it will quickly move out. We can see some discrete. The main problem, I would say, for this in terms of a severe threat for the Carolinas moving into the evening will be the back end. We'll have a little bit of a break. You can see in between here. This is 1Z according to the NAM on Tuesday, which would what time would that be? That'd be about 8 p.m. 9 p.m. tonight. We get a little bit of a break before we get a chance of some discrete thunderstorm activity. Not enough instability to call these supercells. I believe the wind shear will be evident in this. I just don't think there'll be enough instability to really kick off anything. We might get a few rumbles of thunder here and there, but shouldn't be anything to write home about in terms of a severe event. Might get a little bit more intense as we move forward the overnight hours into the Virginia Piedmont and into the DCV, or what is that called? The DMV area. Moving into the overnight hours before the winter storm in the Northeast really starts to kick off, and you can see a pretty tight boundary gradient on the back end of this. I get a lot of people asking why we don't get a lot of just regular snow. It's like always freezing rain and ice, if it ever happens at all, in the Carolinas. And I always say, hey, if you want snow in the Carolinas, all you got to do is just knock down some mountains, and you'll be able to get it a whole lot more often. So you can see kind of what that back end flow would do. You can see it kind of wraps around here into Kentucky and Tennessee. You can see that cold air there, and then it hits the Appalachian Mountains and it cuts off. So that precipitation flow just kind of shuts off as it hits the mountains. Gets a lot more actually on the western slopes of the mountains due to the altitude, but ultimately on the lee side of any kind of altitude or high topography like that, we would expect to see less precipitation. So on those leeward side slopes, and then we move forward, and as we move forward into next few days, high pressure starts to build in, and we're used to that nowadays. The early parts of February have been dominated by these bouts of high pressure over the southeast. Will make things very mild. Should get a little bit more temperate as we move forward into the week. Lows will be around freezing level as we go forward into the first few days, and then we'll gradually start to warm up as we get a little bit more air mass modification going into the week, and we get exposed to more solar radiation during the day due to our cloudless sky. We'll take a look at some of the SPC's mesoscale analyses here. We can see that there is not a lot of instability here, and we talked about that diminished severe threat over the Carolinas. There was a day one convective outlook that extended all the way up and into Georgia and into South Carolina, even touching into the Charlotte metro region. That has been drastically reduced due to the fact that rain shield that we experienced early throughout the day today and last night ultimately worked to prohibit instability. Now, what is instability? Instability is essentially if you have a difference between dry and moist, or dry and cold air interacting with warm and moist air. So if those two things are interacting, like clashing with one another, like they're very close, and they're very distinct, like multiple degrees in both dew point and temperature, that's a high degree lapse rate instability. We would expect a lot of convective available potential energy in that, or CAPE, and ultimately, when that is like the kickoff for severe events, severe storms, right? But ultimately, in this particular scenario, we had precipitation that had overrun the entire warm frontal sector of this surface low. And when that happens, the rain that precipitates from the sky does evaporative cooling as it falls through the lower parts of the atmosphere, and works to actually balance out that a little bit more between the conflicting air masses, right? So all of a sudden, the air that was very warm and moist is all of a sudden getting evaporatively cooled, so it's getting a little bit colder. And so when the cold air mass that comes in behind it via the cold frontal boundary, that disparity is just not as significant as it was prior. And because it's in that warm frontal area where we have a significant amount of precipitation and humidity in this, there isn't a lot of a gradient between dry and moist air. It's very, very subtle. So in that case, we're just not getting a lot of severe weather because the atmosphere is just kind of samey right there. The only areas that we're seeing elevated convective available potential energy right now in the elevated mixed layer, which is the dominant layer in this particular setup, would be over the Big Bend region of Florida and far southern Georgia. That, I believe, is why the SPC. Yeah, that is why the SPC has only denoted a slight severe chance for today for that particular region, due to those instability and the inherent wind shear that's present with a cold frontal system, cold core system like this inherently. And then we have that marginal risk for what we talked about a little bit earlier in the video, due to the chance for some discrete cellular activity overnight into the evening hours. We'll take a look at the 3K NAM as we move forward into our northeastern storm that comes in today. So we can see the NAM pushing through the system to the southeast. The low center starts moving up the Appalachian spine, and eventually, might take a little bit to load, so forgive me. We always talk about here when nor'easters begin, we want them to be on the button, and the button is if the low center is about 50 miles south of what would be like Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, Rhode Island, that general region, pretty much right there. That is a perfect scenario for a giant New England nor'easter snowstorm. And in this predicament, we are experiencing that precise setup. So we have everything in place for this system to take place according to pretty much every parameter that is available to us. The only question now is, and it's a very common question, is where that rain-snow line will ultimately be, because it's a matter of miles, and that's nothing in terms of what areas of the Northeast get rain, what gets snow, what gets a lot of snow, and that all can be within a delineation of only about 100 miles or so, which is nothing. So we'll take a look at some of the outlooks for this. But one of the things I always want to emphasize to everybody with these storms, or just any crazy weather in general, the National Weather Service obviously has a CWA, or a county warning area, for 150 something areas of the United States, all equally dispersed in distance and space. And their whole job, their whole purpose, is to create point by point forecasts for your specific county warning area. And in this particular circumstance, we have the New York City office that serves the southern parts of New York and northern Jersey and Connecticut and Long Island. They put together a great PowerPoint presentation that breaks down every single thing that you would need to know, and what they know and what they need to know and everything for this particular system. So we have their reasonings for their winter watches and advisories here. They break it down by region, what you can expect, and in terms of what the timings are, how much wind, the challenges to it. So they're being honest here. So they said, and we'll get into what their particular challenges are here in a second. We see that the more northern track with the low pressure would reduce snowfalls in this particular warning area. Obviously, there are other warning areas and regions that might have a different outcome, but for this particular region, who they're specifically forecasting for, they're saying that a northern track would reduce snowfall totals in the warning area, and a southern track would lower snowfall totals inland, right? Up in the Catskills, but would ultimately increase snowfall totals down across the coast, and critically the New York City metro region and Long Island. And then obviously we have locations of heavy snow banding that ultimately you can only see when you are in a nowcast situation and you can view real-time radar data. Snow is just very, very finicky. And then it'll tell you obviously when the next brief will be, and they'll put out a whole nother scenario in that particular set. They make these maps. This is their current official forecast as of 6 a.m. this morning, and they particularly denote that Long Island is a major question mark based off of where that low center is. We can have areas in the 3 to 5 inches range, or we can maybe, if it goes a little bit more further south, the low center, we can start tapping into around a foot of snow, which would be quite critical for the Long Island region. This might be a little bit more confusing for people. I don't necessarily agree with how some of the weather offices do this. They have a high end amount, so it's like you have in a 10% scenario. This is kind of like they were saying the maximum that you can get for the particular area that they're in. and then this is the low end of the track if it's essentially a bust. So like they're essentially saying, if you live in the Catskills regions, you're going to get 6 inches of snow for the most part, and then everywhere is going to get snow, but the low end of it would be a trace to less than an inch for the southern part of Long Island, and then the high parts for that region would be 6 to 5 inches. But then again, we have a lot of uncertainty about Long Island, so this is a little bit, they could probably be doing a better job in terms of getting communicators. They're scientists after all. Not all of them are great communicators, but ultimately they're trying their best. We also have a coastal flooding outlook, because this is a surface low, very broad area of are very tightly compacted regions. As that surface low starts to deepen with higher latitudes, we get much more wind, and we get higher wave heights, and obviously the wind is pushing in the pushing in the flow from the Gulf Stream. You gotta get a better. There we go. Obviously, if the low is sitting here, it is moving in a cyclonic motion wind-wise, which means all of that wind is coming in and will be kind of impacting the areas inland of the bays due to moving the water with the wind. It's very common with some of these systems, and that is a possibility going forward for them. And then we have our wind gust forecast. Obviously, gale warnings out in the immediate oceanic vicinity of the coastline. We also have maximum wind gusts up to 40, 50 miles an hour in some cases, but primarily, and this is going to be a main thing also for the winter storm, heavy snow rates with high wind. Once that wind gets over 50 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour sustained, that technically becomes a blizzard. They don't expect blizzard conditions, but it's certainly going to be very, very low visibility, and not a great scenario to be out and about when you're experiencing inch per hour snowfall rates, if not more, along with a 30 to 40 mile an hour wind. So definitely going to be a very pretty, but very could be potentially dangerous for people that are out and about and don't know what they're doing. Another great thing that they do here, this is an experimental forecast on their part, but they get changeover timing as well. So it's like if you move forward, and 1 a.m. tonight, we're expecting rain across Long Island and New York City, and then snow up in the wintry mix in particular coastal regions of Connecticut and Rhode Island, and then we move forward in time, and it shifts over to all snow, and then it get intensity for different kinds of snow. So by tomorrow, we get a chance of snow in the mid-afternoon, but the main areas where we would expect the most heavy snow would be from probably about 4 or 5 a.m. all the way into early afternoon on Tuesday. So certainly very interesting, and that's kind of like what it's a very cool PowerPoint presentation they put together that's very succinct and gives you a lot of information. Another thing that the Weather Prediction Center over in NOAA headquarters does is puts together these maps which dictate how much snow based off probabilities there will be for this particular one. So in this particular map, it's 72 hours probability of snowfall accumulating greater than 2 inches. So anywhere that you see in these dark reds is a 95% chance of getting over 2 inches of snow within the next from now until midday Thursday. So in this particular scenario, we have all the way from Boston into the Poconos region and Poconos regions of Pennsylvania and northern Jersey, and into the Catskills or the upper New York City metro region. The minimum that they're saying is 2 inches. You got a 95% chance of getting more than 2 inches. And then you can keep going down by categories here. So 4 inches, we're still in that 95% category over Hartford, Connecticut, and Providence and Boston. And then we go into 8 inches. A little bit lower of a scenario here, 80% chance for getting 8 inches. Let's see what a foot of snow is. We're at about a 60-70% chance for that particular area, but it's also significant to kind of see where this extends. So there is a 1% chance of getting a foot of snow in central northern PA, all the way along the Delaware River and into Albany. And then we can go even higher. We can go 1.5 feet, about 30-20 for those particular regions we've already highlighted, and 2 feet of snow. It's not out of the question, which is very interesting, but a 1 to 5% chance of getting 2 feet of snow for the areas that we have already talked about there. Don't think there's anything for 2.5 inches or 2.5 feet, sorry, of snow, but 2 feet of snow for that particular region over the course of 3 days is quite significant, and I believe it'll be, this goes out to 3 days. We can see what 48 hours looks like and see if that's any different. So let's do that. 2 feet. Yeah, so the 2 feet definitely could be there within 2 days, which is quite a bit, 2 inches per hour, I believe that, math. But another main thing that we're going to be discussing a lot is where that rain snow line ultimately falls, and ultimately what that means in terms of both snowfall totals in areas, and also where those totals ultimately go. So this is the German icon model, the icon model at 18Z on Wednesday, which is about the end of this particular system. It has 8 to 9 inches and is particularly highlighting the areas that we already talked about by the Weather Prediction Center. But then when you go to the HRRR is very interesting because it has a little bit more of convective potential going across, and the main center would be over Long Island. And we talked about that particular area of New York that is very hit or miss in terms of how much snow it's predicted to get. You can see up in the Catskills regions right here, you're predicting only 1 to 2 inches according to the HRRR, and then a bunch of lake effect snow on the back end of it. But then you get down to it's more of a central Jersey threat, and then off into the Cape Cod region and Long Island, and also the Philadelphia region along the Delaware River. Those are areas that we would expect, according to the HRRR, to be the primary areas for intense snowfall. But then you go and look at the 3-kilometer NAM, and it takes a more northerly track, kind of doing the same thing. So this is where nowcasting kind of takes into effect. We can do, weather forecasters are great at what they do. This is literally their whole profession, is to kind of decide where and when the snow is going to ultimately be. But, this kind of stuff comes down to the day of. So definitely need to pay attention as we go forward hour by hour. We have a good understanding, and we have a good understanding of the potential threats, and that is exactly what we should know about this time. We need to know what the storm is capable of and what it could and can't do. But in terms of actual snowfall totals, that's something that we're going to have to pay attention to as the event is unfolding, unfortunately. We're going to move a little bit further into the future, as we have talked about the northeastern and southeastern components to this surface low system. But moving off into the next few days, we can see kind of our troublemakers. Maybe not so for the southeast, but certainly for the northeast. There's a bunch of little undulations, a bunch of little shortwave troughs right about here, and we got one here off the coast, and then we got another one up here in the Canadian Prairie, and we got a big one that's undulating right here. So we got a lot of energy that's kind of just trying to figure itself out and figure where to go. And ultimately, it's going to be a little bit too late for it, and it's going to start creating energy little polyps into the upper Midwest and into the Northeast as we go forward in time. And we can see that by comparing the GFS and the ECMWF here. We can see our main system starts to move out. Let's get started where we are here. So our system starts to move out, moves off Nova Scotia, goes forward, and then we see another little clipper system hit the Chicago, Michigan, Great Lakes region, and then hits another. We get another shot of snow for the Northeast on the end part of the week, and then we get another little shot of snow towards the middle of the weekend. And then there's quite a bit of uncertainty as to kind of what that means for the Southeast. But in terms of those undulations and shortwave troughs, those are going to be becoming concurrent clipper systems for the Northeast going forward. There's a lot of disparity in terms of what the Southeast is going to experience out of this, because we have a high pressure. According to the GFS, we have high pressure that sits over the Canadian Prairie and Montana, but the Euro has it much more further south, off into the leeward slopes of the Rocky Mountains and the Rocky Mountain Plateau and the High Range. And that's ultimately going to be the primary driver for any kind of convective initiation that occurs over the Southeast. So not a lot of certainty in terms of late week storm systems yet. That's why I believe most areas from the weather forecast surface areas are predicting maybe a 30 to 40% chance of rain across the Southeast moving forward into the later portions of today. That's currently their consensus. There's just not a lot of consensus among the models as they try to figure out what the ramifications are of this particular system in the Northeast as we move forward in time. We can see how much precipitation we're expecting over the course of the next few days. We already had some precipitation in the Southeast past 72 hours. So you can see that we have that primary storm system move up and out of the Southeast and into the Northeast. This is obviously just precipitation, not just snow, just all liquid equivalent. And then we move forward, our next big atmospheric river event, which will be 3 concurrent consecutive events that occur at different portions of the western hemisphere, or western side of the U.S., excuse me. They'll come in at the latter portions of the week. But generally speaking, we don't get a lot more precipitation across the southeast, primarily a northeast event. And particularly Central Florida might get hit with some subtropical ridging and ridge riders along that particular region as we go into Sunday. A lot of uncertainty already at this point of the week on Monday for the southeast, but definitely the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast in general will be under the gun for some more river events moving forward into the weekend and into the latter portions of the midweek work week next week. Moving into the long range, I just wanted to kind of denote a couple of things that I see here. So this is about, we were at about 0Z Friday, so this would be Thursday night. We have a little bit of an omega block-ish kind of looking thing. Typically when we have omega blocks, where we have in the Pacific, we have a trough, high pressure ridge. We get and the reason it's called omega block is because it looks like the Greek symbol for omega. It's usually a blocking pattern because the high pressure will block any of the incoming troughs, rob it of energy, dry it out, and ultimately serve to block a lot of precipitation that would otherwise occur over the central plains. This happens actually a lot during the spring and summer months. So those are, particularly in the spring months, it can be quite a bad situation for drought. But in this particular circumstance, it's not necessarily a traditional block, just because the high pressure doesn't extend all the way down to the Rocky Mountains, and there's a little bit of inward troughing here that comes from the both opposite side lows. So it's like a little pattern. I think ultimately this is going to serve as the main corridor for creating those shortwave trough patterns for the Northeast. And then we have more of a zonal flow pattern and ridging over the southeast going forward into the rest of the week, which is why we have it forecasted to be so dry. And the beginning of those river events out there over the troughed over the Aleutian Islands, right there. So then we move forward a little bit in time, and this is one thing that the European ensemble has kind of put together, which is quite interesting to me. Significant gradient right next to each other, right here. And this is at the 500 millibar level. So typically when you see areas of predicted troughs and ridges right next to each other like that are quite pronounced, that is where we would expect to see an upper level jet. The main thing about that's weird is that would denote a polar jet, which is not something that we have seen in quite some time. And just looking at the 200 millibar upper level pattern, we can actually see that origination of the polar jet here. So if we go forward, actually if we go backward, this is way out also. This is next Thursday. But if we start to where we are now in time, you can see that there's no real differentiation between the subtropical and polar jet. It's just all subtropical. You see the subtropical moving over the Baja California, over Mexico, and over the Gulf of Florida. That's kind of what the pattern has been for the majority of this El Nino winter. And then we have a series of trough jet or North Pacific jet extensions and retractions. But ultimately, going at the end of this, we have the return of a little bit of a polar jet maximum here over the Aleutian Islands. And when that happens, that works to essentially deliver cold air if these troughs were to remain here. And obviously, this is at the very end of it, so there's a lot of leeway in terms of what this could possibly mean. But anytime that we do get a polar jet, that means that the winds are acting to bring in essentially what's north of a polar jet. It's Arctic air. So if this polar jet were to dip down further and into the contiguous continental United States, anything beyond it or behind it would be Arctic air. So and that's something that has been missing from the majority of our February pattern, actually from all of our February pattern, since our cold snap that we experienced in January. And then also we have to take a look at what the polar vortex is expected to do, and according to the Euro for next Wednesday, Thursday, it's still supposed to be quite lopsided due to the sudden stratospheric warming event that it's going to experience here over the early part of this week. So interesting little thing to keep an eye on. Our initial thoughts from earlier in the month that we would have a little bit more of a Aleutian ridging that would displace a lot of that cold air was kind of ruined, I would say, by the subtropical jet that ultimately served to push, or a subtropical ridge, I should say, that ultimately worked to push away any of the antecedent cold air that ridging was going to deliver. And then also the troughs were not necessarily, and therefore the troughs were not necessarily in place in the lower continental U.S., which ultimately led to it kind of being a little bit of a bust. And we don't have the warmth that we had early in February anymore, but we're definitely not as cold as we were in January. We're much more climatological in terms of average mean temperatures right now. Maybe with the addition of this split flow polar jet over the Aleutians next week, this could be the start of maybe a little, March could be in like a lion, if that were to come to pass for a good part of the country. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But that's it for what I got today. Got a few triple threat systems right there, and just wanted to kind of look into the future just a little bit. Once again, my name is Zach for Great Atmosphere. I do appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate your subscription. Specifically, you live in the southeastern region of the U.S., which is where I'm based. I'll be making these forecasting videos for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the afternoon, just to kind of hone my own forecasting skill and knowledge, while also trying to communicate and kind of cut through the noise of typical weather forecasting phenomena that you would see here on social media. So I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate your subscription, and I will see you on Wednesday for another forecasting video. Take care.